uh, we had some people mention that they had a couple of webinars or online presentations that they had to do for their um, project. So I'll sort of just go a bit with a reminder of some of the communication skills. And just from a business point of view, it's really good to have communication skills, because you get into situations where you have to convince people of your plan, or convince people that the company's in good shape, or speak to shareholders. So uh, when you get in a position where you're like, the company might be in trouble, or the company's launching a new product, you really want to have those communication skills to fall back on. So one of the quotes that I found out of some of my recent reading was, communication is always important, but it is even more essential when things are not working. So if you're in business and you need to ask someone a favor, or ask someone to trust your company, having those communication skills can be key. So I'm talking with some of the business people about how they develop their communication skills. It's I one of the companies I work with, well, not one, the other company that I work with, we have actuaries and we have accountants who are very, very skilled. And then they reach a certain point in their career where they can't manage people because they can't talk to people that well. And we actually have situations where we take them to events and practice small talk with them, because it's not that they need to learn more about accounting or they need to learn more about risk. They need to learn, what they need to learn about is how to talk to people, and we'll have them come into the office and listen to a guest speaker. So what those people need to do is to find occasions to practice, and whether it's making small talk with their friends, sometimes learning a new language. I really liked improvisation when I was in high school. I think that can help you feel confident. And a lot of the successful CEOs that we like have a bit of an extemporaneous speaking style, meaning they're not just reading a script. It's good to have that script, it's good to have your talking points, but if you can be a little off the cuff, it'll sound a little more relaxed, it'll sound more informal. And I think that's something that you as students can develop. I see a lot of presentations where people are reading their phones or reading the script, and it's not very spontaneous. If you were to switch reading like a script off your phone with having a list of key points, or if you were to print out a checklist of the points you want to cover and just have it to the right hand side of your laptop as you're doing a screencast, it might come off as being more informal. So when you're on Zoom, again, try to, I don't have a very well-lit background today, but try to be, dress casually, but not, too formal. You want to be, relatable. If you don't have a good background, get a good, um, you know, get a good virtual background, and, keep things tidy. And one thing that I find is a bit difficult when I'm teaching, no one turns their camera on, and it's hard to read the room. Uh, it's still something you want to do when you're doing your online culminatings in an online setting. So uh, it's like I'm feel like if everyone, in workplace, you're going to have everyone all having their camera on, and you can check in to see if people are listening, if people are monitoring what you're saying. And you still want to do that, even though it's not a room of people. Try to monitor the room if possible, and encourage people to try to give you the thumbs up or use the raise hand feature. This is a slide of a British cabinet meeting that's being done online. What if one doesn't have? Okay, so that's fair that you might not everyone might have a camera. So what you miss is, if you had a quizzical expression in class, I could stop and ask a question or repeat something. Or if I thought someone was distracted in class, I could call them back into the group. So yeah, it's true. I feel like there's about, you know, out of, there might be one or two people who don't have a webcam, but some people might be choosing not to show it. And that's your right. But what it does to the person presenting is we're not sure if you're actually listening or not. And we might not be as interactive. So no one's penalizing you in this situation because it's totally new and it's never happened before. But it it does feel better when we're having a meeting, like when we have one of the North Toronto coaches meetings and everyone has their camera on. It's a lot more interactive. So if you do become, if you do move on to teach, sometimes the universities, they use Camtasia that can stop the presentation and give out a little quiz. But with the TDSB, we don't have that feature. I think practicing the tech ahead of time. I was attended one session by Mike Prospicio, who had a lot of video, and he actually recorded the whole thing ahead of time because he didn't want to have some lag due to the video. It allowed him to um, take, have the best take of his presentation. So if you do have to do an English presentation in front of the class, maybe cheat a little bit and record it. It'll allow you to edit out perhaps an occasion where you paused a lot, an occasion where you stumbled. Uh, and if you are scheduled to speak, have that backup internet connection ready. If you ever used your phone as a hotspot, that's definitely a skill you need to know, because it's possible, that the Wi-Fi, you don't want it to ruin one of your culminating activities or your big presentation. And as I said, always arrive early to make sure the video is playing. Some public speaking from some CEOs. Knowing your audience. So sometimes a mistake that people make in these online meetings is they go and they introduce each other themselves from scratch. But if you already know them, that's not really necessary. You can sort of continue on from your last conversation. What is it that they're looking for? I have Phil Knight here, his first slide. He's at the Nike annual general meeting, so he's very formal and he's very official because he's giving shareholders financial information. There's another time where he's speaking at the Basketball Hall of Fame, where he was inducted because of his contributions to basketball. So he's more informal, he's telling more stories. It's a different type of speech for a different type of audience. And if you do take international business, understand that there will be cultural norms. In some countries, it will be like in Asia, sometimes the authority figure is addressing the other authority figure only. And then in other parts of the world, it's more like you're speaking to the whole group. So it's part of selling your vision. So here, as I mentioned, I've been reading about Howard Schultz. He talks a lot about the need to get the whole company together to convince them about his new vision. That it wasn't because it was difficult business circumstances at the time, not everyone was on board. So it was necessary to grab everyone together and have frequent meetings to encourage people who were enthusiastic and on board with the changes. I think if you do have some culminatings to do this year, try to improve your introduction to engage people. Like one tip that came up among some of the business people is get to the point. Why should people listen to this presentation? And then give a quick preview. I think sometimes I still get it from the grade 12 class. They sort of say their name and then they start talking, really spending that extra 30 seconds about what their main point is going to be, why it's important, and giving a quick preview, I think could engage the audience a lot better. I read something last week about how novelty helps retention. So if the brain, is going to compare what it hears to what it already knows, and then if there's something surprising or new, it sort of activates a switch that brings everyone's focus to the next level. So if you've all done the same book in English and you all have to do presentations about it, it's not new. If you can find a little twist, something that everyone else didn't cover, like a fact about a character that not everyone else is aware of, you have the opportunity to get them to pay more attention. Um, you know, maybe everyone in economics read the same textbook, but if you go and link it to today's current events, it kind of makes it a little new. Or sometimes people even do a total non sequitur, like you have this little slide of flowers just because it's going to stand up relative to anything else, and hopefully you pay attention to it. But don't overdo the novelty, because then the content will suffer, and you're just trying to be surprising, and that won't be a good presentation. You know, if you want to tell stories to engage the audience, it can also help you be authentic. This is a time, you know, Steve Jobs is trying to launch the iPhone, and they start having technical difficulties during the presentation itself, but he sort of handles it very much in stride, and it sort of builds the rapport with the audience. Try to play that.
We're gonna.
So he has some slide trouble, and then he has to improvise.
You know, when I was in high school, Steve Wozniak and I, mostly Steve, made this little device called a TV jammer. And it was this little oscillator that would put out frequencies that would screw up the TV. And Woz would have it in his pocket. And we'd go into like a dorm at Berkeley where he was going to school, and a bunch of folks would be watching like Star Trek. And he'd screw up the TV, and somebody'd go up to fix it. And just as they had their foot off the ground, he'd turn it back on. And if they put their foot back on the ground, he'd screw up the TV again. And within 5 minutes, he'd have somebody like this for the rest of the Star Trek episode. Okay, so maybe it's working now. Maybe they're going to have to click them for me.
So again, just little stories like that. I think if there is something that doesn't totally go as planned, it's a chance to build the connection with the audience. And I think it engaged everyone. Just the fact that there was a little bit of humor in there, even though it was a very serious announcement, and it was an announcement about a big new product for Apple. It's still okay to make those authentic connections with the audience. Keeping it simple. Again, like, so sometimes you guys put a lot of text on your slides. So this is Steve Jobs. This is the slide he showed when he launched the iPhone, right? Which was maybe the biggest product that he's launched, because it really changed how we used our phone. You know, in the 90s, a few people had phones. They were very, very big. Then they started to have the ability to send text messages. Then there were, you know, but they, you know, you still wouldn't check it all the time. You'd have it on you. And then once iPhone and BlackBerry came out, it became these little personal assistants we always would check. So that was his slide for launching the iPhone. Apple reinvents the iPhone. It's quick. It's to the point. It's like you're tweeting, like, well, not Donald Trump crazy tweeting, but, you know, the 140 characters, quick and to the point, or like you're writing a newspaper headline. You can always fill in the gaps with your words, but keep the slides very, very simple. This is one of the reasons why if you have a webcam, it can be good to turn it on. So, and do try to make eye contact with your camera as much as possible. So Mike Krzyzewski, basketball coach, has a rule on my team. When we talk to each other, we look each other right in the eye, because I think it's tough to lie to someone. You give respect to someone. And here's an example of everyone's listening intently, because the communicator, is taking time to look at them, and there's a connection. When you have your phone out as a student, and the worst students put it right in front of their face almost. Sometimes they're always looking at it, and because the font tends to be smaller, they're looking down and they're missing that opportunity for eye contact. That's why I sort of recommend that you print out your key points on like a bigger sheet of paper, because you could have it next to your computer, glance over, and then still return back to the room and make eye contact with the camera, and therefore make eye contact with the people you're talking to. And the bullet points, I think, are better than the script because it will still be more extemporaneous. So, here's someone who is making sure, even though they're the only one listening, he's the only person talking, they have to listen to him, he's still making eye contact. Ending on a high note. Sometimes we get these slides with culminating projects like "Thank you for listening." I had 100 of those with grade 12 international business, but maybe there's a way to end on a high note, a way to be a little bit more memorable, like your most important point, something that's motivational, something that raises the energy level. So we know Wayne Gretzky, hockey player. So again, when Steve Jobs was launching the iPhone, his closing slide was, "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been." And that was his way of symbolizing that Apple was going to be ahead of the curve, and that Apple would always be looking to create new products that the consumer would want and would succeed because of that. So hopefully those are some communication tips that help you do very well on these culminating activities. I know everyone is frustrated by always looking at the computer, but um, if you take the time to make a very compelling presentation, if you try to be extemporaneous, if you try to be a little authentic, if you try to be a little bit novel, I think your presentations will stand out well, and hopefully you get that very, very good mark that you deserve. So that's, I guess, my comments today. Last class was a bit about how to use Zoom. This was about communication.